The birthday cake placed in the center of the long dining table was adorned with white roses, its flickering candlelight casting shadows on Patricia's aged face. She had prepared for this moment for a whole month, dreaming of a warm reunion where everyone would sing celebratory songs, where her only daughter, Emily, would embrace her, offering a sweet smile like she did when she was a child. However, the atmosphere was thick, as if no one dared to breathe heavily. Emily, in a vibrant red dress, suddenly stood up amidst the crowd, her voice echoing, "I wish you were dead." The sound fell like a blade cutting through the air. All laughter, all well wishes ceased. An aunt dropped her glass, the crystal shattering noisily. The relatives exchanged glances, then looked towards Patricia. She stood frozen, the cake knife still trembling in her hand. Her daughter's words echoed in her mind, repeating like an indelible sentence. In front of so many people, Patricia felt as if she had been stripped bare, her life's failure as a mother exposed. Emily didn't stop. She gritted her teeth, her eyes blazing, her chest heaving. "You never understood me. You only ever kept everything for yourself. If you were gone, my life would be different." A murmur spread around the table. Some people looked down to avoid eye contact. Others stared with curiosity. Patricia swallowed hard, her throat dry and rough. She wanted to say something in her defense, to beg her daughter to stop, but her lips were stiff. Her heart pounded erratically, filled with both pain and shame. In that moment, she saw her own reflection in the gleaming silver knife, an old, tired face, her eyes brimming with tears. She no longer recognized herself. Patricia tried to force a smile, but the corners of her lips trembled. She looked for a hand among her relatives, for comfort, for a plea to stop, but everyone remained silent. Even her sister, who had stood by her through difficult times, merely shook her head slightly, avoiding her gaze. Emily continued, her voice growing increasingly bitter. "Do you know, I've wished this since I was 10 years old. I wished it was you who died, not Dad." Sharp intakes of breath could be heard. The air became suffocating. Patricia felt as if she had been slapped in the face. Painful memories flooded back. The day her husband left, the day she struggled to raise her child alone, the sleepless nights spent praying for her child to have a decent childhood. And yet now, all those sacrifices were met with a curse. A relative opened their mouth to intervene, but Emily waved them away, stepping back, her eyes burning with fury. "I hate you. I hate how you made me live in the shadow of the past. I even hate your pretense of strength. You're not a hero. You're just a burden." Patricia felt the ground beneath her feet crumble. She tried to take a step, but her entire body felt weak. She wanted to shout, to tell Emily she was wrong, that it was all a misunderstanding, but her chest tightened, her throat felt as if it were being squeezed. The room was deathly quiet. The candles on the birthday cake still burned, casting a wavering light into her reddened eyes. In that moment, Patricia realized what she had desperately tried to preserve for 65 years, the image of a resilient mother, a happy family, had been shattered by her own daughter in a few sentences. Everyone's eyes were fixed on her, as if waiting to see if she would crumble or rise. But Patricia just stood there, her hands hanging limply, the knife falling onto the table with a dry, cold sound. Within her heart, a massive crack had just formed, and it would only widen. Patricia sat motionless after the party, in the living room now filled only with darkness and the faint scent of wine. The chandelier above the ceiling was still lit, casting faint golden streaks onto the floor. She leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes. Her daughter's voice, screaming in her face, "I wish you were dead," still echoed, like needle pricks piercing every fiber of her being. But then, in that silence, her mind involuntarily pulled her back years ago. The day Emily was born. Patricia remembered that moment vividly. A damp autumn morning, the cold hospital delivery room. When the doctor placed the squirming newborn on her chest, she burst into tears. Those tiny eyes were shut tight, the small hands flailing in the air, as if searching for something to grasp. Patricia held her child close, her heart trembling. "From now on, you will be my everything." But it wasn't long before that promise was tested. The husband she loved, Emily's father, left for another woman. He left behind a house full of debt, a newborn child, and a broken heart. Patricia, barely in her 30s, with no stable job and no one to help, was left with only a desperate reliance on the tiny life in her arms. The early years of raising her child alone were a struggle. Patricia worked 3 jobs at once, washing dishes at a diner in the morning, serving tables in a small restaurant at noon, and cleaning offices at night. She returned home late at night, her body aching, but just seeing Emily asleep in her crib, her lips pursed, all her fatigue vanished. She whispered to herself, "I will give you everything, as long as you don't feel a lack of love." But paradoxically, that very sacrifice inadvertently became a distance. As Emily grew, she didn't see her mother around much. Patricia was often away, came home late, and rarely attended school events. Once, Emily innocently handed her mother an invitation to her class's first play. Patricia promised firmly she would come, but that day she was caught in an unexpected work shift. By the time she arrived, the auditorium lights were off, and her daughter had gone home with tear-reddened eyes. Patricia knelt by the bed, holding Emily's hand, apologizing profusely. But the girl just turned away, whispering, "I wish Dad was still here." That sentence stabbed Patricia's heart like a knife, and that knife remained etched there for many years. Emily's teenage years were the period when Patricia felt most distant from her daughter, as if an invisible wall had gradually risen between them. Emily grew to resemble her father more and more. His deep brown eyes, the way she pouted when displeased, even her habit of falling into a cold silence when pressed. Every time Patricia looked at her daughter, her heart ached, as if forced to remember her ex-husband's betrayal. Emily entered her teens amidst the storms of adolescence. She began to rebel, no longer the obedient child who would run into her mother's arms whenever she stumbled. Now, Emily slammed her bedroom door, blasting music loudly, ignoring Patricia's patient knocking. Sometimes Patricia would sit before that door for hours, just hoping her daughter would open it, would say a single word to her. But the only response was silence or the weary sighs of adolescence. The economy was still tight at that time. Patricia poured all her savings into ensuring Emily could attend a better high school in the city. She thought perhaps giving her a better learning environment would make her feel less disadvantaged, but reality proved otherwise. Emily began to compare herself to her friends whose fathers drove them to school, friends who went on summer vacations, friends with young and beautiful mothers. While she only had a busy mother, with prematurely graying hair and worn-out clothes, one evening, when Patricia placed a simple plate of spaghetti on the table, Emily bluntly said, "Aren't you ever ashamed?" "I hate bringing friends home and seeing this greasy kitchen of yours." The words hit her like a slap in the face. Patricia stood frozen, her hand gripping the serving spoon, her heart twisting. She wanted to scream, "Do you know how hard I worked to put this meal on the table?" But she held back, only nodding slightly, swallowing her humiliation. Deep down, Patricia knew Emily was trying to assert herself, but that defiance felt like knives slicing through their already fragile bond. With each passing day, Patricia felt her daughter becoming a distant planet, while she was merely someone on the ground, gazing up, never able to reach her. Then one day, Patricia accidentally saw Emily crying in her room, holding an old picture of her father. She gently opened the door, intending to step in and hug her daughter, but Emily snapped, "Get out! I don't need you!" Patricia quietly closed the door, leaned against the wall, tears streaming down her face. She didn't know if she was in pain from rejection or from seeing the man who had once abandoned her still occupying her daughter's heart. When Emily entered her 20s, Patricia thought the teenage storm would gradually subside, and indeed, outwardly, her daughter had changed. She excelled in her studies and won a scholarship to a prestigious university. The day Emily received her acceptance letter, Patricia cried, both proud and relieved, as if all her sacrifices had finally borne fruit. During the send-off for her daughter to college, Patricia hugged Emily tightly at the train station platform. She gave her daughter countless pieces of advice: stay healthy, eat well, and don't get caught up in frivolous things. Emily nodded perfunctorily, her eyes already fixed on the whistling train. As the train car door closed, Patricia remained standing there, waving, until only a fading silhouette was visible. At that moment, she still believed that the distance between mother and daughter would be bridged by Emily's success, but she was wrong. During her college years, Emily rarely called home. The calls were brief, the messages short, often revolving around money: tuition increases, a need for a new laptop, rent money. Each time Patricia sent money, she would quietly cut back on her own expenses, buying fewer clothes, even skipping regular health checkups. She never complained, for the only faith she clung to was, "My child is building her future. As long as she is happy, I can bear hardship." Emily graduated with a prestigious degree and quickly found a job at a major financial firm. She appeared in elegant business attire, high heels, with voluminous styled hair and sharp eyes. Each time she visited home, Emily brought the scent of expensive perfume, along with a confident, almost arrogant demeanor. Patricia felt both proud and estranged. Her daughter was truly successful, but why did she feel like she was facing a stranger? Family dinners grew increasingly silent. Patricia would initiate conversation, and Emily would respond with curt remarks. When asked about relationships or friends, Emily would brush it off. "Don't interfere, Mom. That's none of your business." Once during dinner, Patricia timidly mentioned her desire for Emily to have a stable home and family to ease her loneliness. Emily slammed her wine glass down, her eyes flashing with annoyance. "You're always thinking about family, but you couldn't even keep your own family together. What right do you have to lecture me?" That statement froze the room. Patricia bit her lip tightly, her heart shattered. She understood that in Emily's eyes, she was forever a failure, unable to keep her husband, unable to provide a full childhood. From then on, Patricia spoke less. She retreated into the role of a silent provider, standing outside the glamorous world Emily was creating for herself. Yet the more she remained silent, the more she felt the chasm between them widening, an abyss that could not be bridged. In the old attic of the house, there was a wooden chest that Emily was never allowed to touch. Patricia kept the key, and each time she cleaned, she did so with extreme care, as if protecting fragile treasure. In reality, the chest contained nothing valuable except for a few old albums, some belongings left by her ex-husband, and a letter. The letter was written in a familiar handwriting, his handwriting. The day she received it, Patricia sat in stunned silence for hours. In the letter, he confessed that before he left, he had learned the truth. Emily was not his biological daughter. He wrote that he had tried to accept it, but bitterness and betrayal made it impossible for him to continue. He left, partly for another woman, and partly because he could no longer live with that feeling for another day. Patricia folded the letter, hid it at the bottom of the chest, and locked it securely. For all these years, she had never revealed the truth to Emily, because in her heart, Emily was her daughter, not by blood, but by love and sacrifice. She chose to remain silent, bearing the secret, and accepting all her daughter's reproaches, as long as Emily never had to feel like an abandoned child. Some nights, Patricia would open the chest, take out the letter, and read it with trembling hands. The ink on the pages had blurred from her tears. Many times, she considered burning it to end all the haunting memories, but she couldn't, partly out of fear that Emily might one day learn the truth from someone else, partly, perhaps, because Patricia had never truly let go of that memory. Whenever she looked at Emily, successful and proud, but with eyes full of hatred for her, Patricia always wondered, if my child knew she wasn't his blood relative, would things be different? Would she still blame everything on her mother? Yet, the greatest fear still gripped her. If Emily knew, she would hate her even more, believing her entire life had been a lie, and Patricia dared not gamble. So, she continued to live with the burden of that secret, quiet as a sinner in her own home. The chest in the attic, old, dusty, remained like a shadow. Every time she passed it, Patricia felt it breathing, a reminder that a ticking time bomb lay within this family, waiting to explode. Patricia closed the lid of the wooden chest, her trembling hand tightening around the tiny key. The wind whistling outside the window seemed to remind her that all secrets, sooner or later, would be exposed. But she tried to reassure herself. As long as I am alive, you don't need to know. Yet, even in the most peaceful moments, Patricia felt a silent crack spreading. The more Emily grew up and succeeded, the wider that cold distance became, like a bottomless abyss. Her daughter spoke to her with the tone of a judge, rather than a child seeking comfort. Once, Emily came home in a luxurious dress, crossed her legs on the sofa, glanced around the old room and said, "Have you ever thought about selling this house? I can help you find a new place, more modern and comfortable." Patricia immediately understood the implication. This house was the only asset she had left, and Emily had her sights set on it. She simply smiled awkwardly and changed the subject. But inwardly, Patricia felt an alarm bell had just rung. That night, after Emily had returned to the city, Patricia sat alone by the window, watching the pale moonlight cast shadows on the small garden. She thought to herself, "My daughter, do you know, I have kept a great secret from you for over 30 years. Yet now, you look at me like an obstacle." The memories, the sacrifices, the tears she once thought would evoke Emily's sympathy now lingered like a faint layer of dust on an old bookshelf. Patricia knew she couldn't hold back time. Her daughter was no longer the child who clung to her mother's sleeve during thunderstorms. Emily was now a strong, decisive woman, but also ambitious and cold. As the memories faded, Patricia opened her eyes to find herself still sitting in the empty living room after the chaotic birthday party. The birthday cake had melted into a mess, the candles burnt out. Her daughter's curses still seemed to echo somewhere within the cold walls. And in her heart, a heavy premonition welled up. The day the wooden chest in the attic was opened, everything would collapse. The house was still a mess after the birthday party. Dirty dishes were piled in the sink, red wine stains marred the tablecloth, and the cloying smell of cake hung in the air. Patricia sat in the armchair, her hands clasped tightly together. She thought she would cry, but her eyes were dry, only a burning sensation remained in her chest. The door opened with a click. Emily walked in, her high heels clicking on the tile floor. She showed no sign of remorse. On the contrary, her eyes were cold, her voice indifferent. "What are you still doing sitting here? I thought you had gone to bed." Patricia looked up. Her throat tightened, but she managed to speak softly. "Emily, why did you say that in front of everyone? Do you know how humiliated I felt?" Emily crossed her arms and shrugged. "I was just telling the truth. The sooner people understand, the less pretending there will be." The answer made Patricia tremble. She stood up abruptly, taking a step forward, her eyes dazed. "What truth? Do you want me to die? Do you hate me that much?" Emily was silent for a moment, then gave a wry smile. "You keep acting like a victim. Do you think you sacrificed a lot for me? In reality, you just wanted to keep me close so you wouldn't be lonely. You're selfish. Have you ever asked what I needed?" Patricia felt as if she had been struck by lightning. The words thrown out by her daughter brought back memories of long nights working, rushed meals, all to raise Emily to adulthood, and now it was all negated by just 2 words: selfish. She wanted to retort, but her throat was choked with emotion. Emily stood there, proud, like a judge delivering a verdict. Patricia realized, from this moment on, the storm had truly begun. The air between mother and daughter was thick, as if a single spark would ignite it. Patricia gripped the edge of her chair, trying to keep her voice calm. "You can blame me for many things, But why do you want me dead? Does living one more day make you that uncomfortable? Emily tossed her hair, her eyes icy. Not living one more day, but living one more day in this house, clinging to things that no longer have meaning. You know, this house is worth 3 times what you think. If we sell it, both of us will have a better life. Patricia froze. So behind the harsh words, there were other calculations. She bit her lip, feeling as if all the blood had been drained from her body. You want to sell this house? This is where you grew up, where your father once lived. Do you want to erase everything? Emily smirked, her voice disdainful. Your father left long ago. You cling to the past, turning this house into your own tomb. I don't. I want to move forward. If you refuse, you're just a burden. Patricia felt her heart constrict. For years, she had kept the house not just for the memories, but because it was the only place she believed motherly love still existed. Every brick, every door held traces of Emily's childhood. Bedtime stories, childish scribbles on the walls. All of that now, to her daughter, was just a burden. Her voice trembled, almost a plea. Emily, I have nothing but this house. This is where I want to live until I die. How could you? Emily cut her off, sharp and cold. How much longer will you live? A year? 2 years? Have you ever thought about me having to bear this responsibility? If you truly loved me, you would think about my future, not cling to your past. Those words were like knives piercing Patricia's heart. She looked at her daughter, no longer recognizing the child who used to cry for a hug on stormy nights. Before her now stood a cold, calculating, and ambitious woman. A thought flashed through Patricia's mind. Was someone instigating Emily? Was there some other force behind it, causing her daughter to change so much? The room fell silent. Only the ticking of the clock remained, as if counting down to a larger explosion. Patricia stood up abruptly, her chair toppling backward with a loud clatter. Her eyes welled with tears, but her voice had hardened. Enough, Emily! I've heard your complaints my whole life, but I won't let you treat me like an object to be disposed of. Emily paused for a moment, then sneered, crossing her arms. Mom, I don't need to dispose of anything. I'm just stating what needs to be done. Do you know how much pressure I've been under? All my friends have family inheritances, while I have a stubborn mother clinging to a dilapidated old house. I've had to borrow money and work myself to exhaustion just because you wouldn't compromise. Patricia frowned, her heart shaken. Borrow? You borrowed money? Since when? Emily turned away, her voice sharp. It's none of your mother's business. But if you had sold this house, I wouldn't be suffering like this. Yet you claim you sacrificed for me? How ridiculous! Patricia felt a surge of indignation. She recalled how, over the years, every penny she saved went to Emily, from tuition, books, to her first work clothes. She had neglected her own basic needs, from a new shirt to doctor's visits, all so Emily wouldn't fall behind her friends. And now, her daughter dared to say she had never given enough. Her hands trembled, but her voice suddenly turned icy. Do you know, Emily, you've already taken too much from me. My time, my health, my youth, even my tears. But this house, I won't let you take it. This is my last refuge. Emily clenched her fists, her eyes flashing with defiance. If you don't give it to me, I'll find a way myself. Don't blame me. The words fell like a threat. Patricia was stunned, her heart pounding. In that moment, she looked directly into her daughter's eyes and realized a painful truth. Emily no longer just wanted to help her mother change her life, but was actively using her for her own selfish gain. In the small room, 2 women, one aged, the other brimming with ambition, stood facing each other. Between them was no longer warm motherly love, but a cold struggle, like 2 strangers fighting over a final inheritance. That night, after their fiery argument, Emily stormed out, slamming the door, leaving Patricia alone in the dark room. The clock struck 12, the ticking like a drill boring into her skull. Patricia sat motionlessly on the chair, her heart a tangled mess. The pain was no longer a scratch, but a deep, dark chasm. Suddenly, she remembered when Emily was in high school. There were times her daughter would disappear all night, leaving her frantically calling everyone. When Emily returned, her eyes red-rimmed, clothes disheveled, she would only reply curtly, "I was with a friend." But her averted gaze and hidden hands made Patricia suspect something was wrong. Another time, she found a wad of strange cash in Emily's coat pocket. When asked, Emily snapped, "Don't interfere," and threw the bag away. Patricia chose to remain silent, telling herself her daughter would grow up and learn right from wrong. But thinking back now, she felt a chill. Perhaps from very early on, Emily had learned to hide, to get what she wanted through dishonest means. The dying candle on the birthday cake remained in Patricia's mind like a bitter metaphor. Emily was blazing brightly out there, leaving her only ashes and darkness. The more she thought, the more she shivered. The debts Emily mentioned, could they be the result of those dangerous relationships? Patricia clutched her chest, her breathing rapid. She wanted to push away the worst thought, that her daughter might be entangled with loan sharks or even darker paths, but a mother's intuition is rarely wrong. For decades, she had learned to recognize the deceit in her child's eyes, and tonight, Emily's eyes were clearer than ever. She whispered to herself, her voice hoarse, "My child, what are you hiding from me? And how much more humiliation must I endure?" The moonlight outside the window flickered, casting shadows on the garden. Patricia sat there, like a slumped ghost, knowing the real storm had yet to begin. The next morning, as the first rays of sunlight crept through the curtains, Patricia, still drowsy on the chair, heard the door burst open. Emily entered, her demeanor cold, carrying an expensive designer handbag. Without an apology, without a hint of remorse, she placed the bag on the table and looked directly at her mother. "Mother, I need money." Patricia was stunned. She looked up, her lips trembling. Yesterday you said words that cut me to the heart, and now you're—" Emily waved her hand, interrupting, her voice resolute. "This is not the time for emotions. I have an urgent payment to make. If I don't, I'll be in big trouble. Help me this once, Mother, and everything will be fine." Patricia looked into her daughter's eyes, which sparkled with urgency but also held something sly. Her heart ached. "What have you done, Emily? Why are you in this situation? I've given you everything. Why do you always need more? More?" Emily frowned, her shoulders tensing. "You wouldn't understand. In my world, if you don't have money, you'll be devoured. Do you think my job is just sitting at a desk? No, I have to compete, I have to prove myself, and to do that I need capital, I need support. All my friends have their families supporting them. What do I have? A mother clinging to this dilapidated old house." Patricia shivered. Those words, the way her daughter emphasized "mother," made her feel like she was nothing but an obstacle. She whispered, her voice choked. "Do you know what I sacrificed for you to have what you have today? And now you just see me as a walking wallet?" Emily huffed, glancing at the watch on her wrist. "I don't have time to argue. I'm only asking you one last time. Will you give it to me or not? If you refuse, don't blame me for doing something you won't like." In the small room, the atmosphere became suffocatingly heavy. Patricia looked at her daughter as if seeing a stranger. She wanted to hug Emily, to pull her back to how she used to be, but now there was an unbridgeable chasm between them. She shook her head slightly, her eyes blurring with tears. "Have you changed this much, Emily?" Emily didn't answer, just stood there, silent, her lips pressed tightly together. The clock ticked, as if counting down to a greater secret being exposed. Patricia took a deep breath, as if gathering the last of her strength. For years, she had been accustomed to conceding, enduring, and remaining silent while Emily said whatever she pleased. But this time, the feeling of being reduced to a walking wallet felt like the ultimate humiliation. She raised her head, looked directly into her daughter's eyes, her voice chillingly sharp. "No, I will not give you another cent." Emily's eyes widened in surprise. Then she let out a sarcastic laugh. "What do you think you're doing? Lecturing me? Don't forget, everything you have was kept by me. Without me, you would have died in this miserable prison long ago." Patricia clenched her fists, her body trembling with anger. "You are wrong, Emily. It was I who kept everything for you. Without me, you would never have had the chance to study, never have had the foundation to work and live this luxurious life. Don't forget, I paid with my youth and my entire life to give you what you have today." Emily tilted her chin up, her eyes cold, her voice rising. "If that's the case, then consider your debt paid. Now it's your turn to pay the rest. Sell this house and give me the money. That's only fair." Patricia felt the blood boil within her. She took a step forward, her eyes bloodshot. "You call that fair? Is it fair that I raised you and you curse me, want me dead, and want to take away the only thing I have? If that's your definition of fair, then I'd rather be wronged my entire life." Emily gripped her purse strap, her lips trembling as if suppressing a furious rage. "Mom will regret this." The words fell into the room like a death sentence. Patricia stared at her daughter in shock, realizing the chasm between them had grown beyond all limits. These were no longer childish complaints, no longer teenage tantrums. This was a genuine threat, a deep fissure that could tear their mother-daughter bond apart at any moment. In that instant, the room seemed to thicken. Patricia could clearly hear her heart pounding, beads of sweat trickling down her temples. She understood that this was no longer just an argument. This was a warning. Emily had crossed a line she could no longer control. After Emily's cold threat, the room plunged into a deadly silence. Patricia stood frozen, her hands trembling, but her eyes never left her daughter. In that moment, she realized she was facing not just Emily, the daughter she had dedicated her life to raising, but a stranger, a calculating, sharp-edged woman ready to demolish everything to achieve her goals. Emily turned away, took her phone from her handbag, scrolled quickly, and let out a short laugh. "You think you're so strong? Wait until you receive the debt notice in your name, and you'll understand helplessness." Patricia was stunned, her blood draining from her face. "Debt notice. What did you just say, Emily?" Emily didn't answer, merely glanced at her mother with cold eyes, like a knife cutting deep into her heart. Then she put away her phone, slung her handbag over her shoulder, and leisurely walked towards the door. "I'll give you time to think, but don't take too long. People don't wait." The door clicked shut behind Emily, leaving Patricia standing alone. The words echoed in her mind, sending her thoughts into a chaotic spin. People don't wait. Who was Emily involved with? Creditors? Loan sharks? Or something worse? She sank onto a chair, her heart hammering, her breath coming in ragged gasps. For a fleeting moment, Patricia felt the house was no longer a sanctuary, but a battlefield, where every brick, every wall was trembling before collapse. Her mind reeled. Memories of Emily's disappearances, unexplained stacks of money, evasive glances, all resurfaced like scattered pieces, and now they had formed a terrifying picture. Her daughter was not just selfish, but dangerous. Patricia clutched her head, whispering in despair, "Oh God, what have you done?" Outside the window, the night sky was inky black, with only the wind whistling through the trees. She knew the real storm was coming, and this time it would sweep away all illusions of a peaceful home. 2 days later, Patricia received a thick envelope delivered to her home. A bright red bank seal immediately caught her eye. Her heart pounding, she opened the envelope, each page as cold as a blade, a credit agreement, a debt repayment schedule, and what made her freeze, her own signature under borrower. Patricia clutched the papers tightly, her vision blurring. She knew clearly it wasn't her signature. But the forged handwriting was frighteningly accurate, enough to convince any bank employee of its authenticity. Fear surged through her like a flood. Who had done this? She didn't need to think long. Only one person had the motive: Emily. The room spun. Patricia felt her knees buckle, forcing her to grip the table to stay upright. Lines of text detailing principal debt, penalty interest, and due date danced before her eyes like relentless stabs. She heard her own voice whisper, trembling, "Oh God, my daughter." That afternoon, Emily returned. Patricia was already seated in the living room, the contract spread out on the table. Her gaze was no longer soft, but red-rimmed and sharp. As Emily entered, she pointed directly. "Explain yourself. What is this?" Emily flinched slightly, but quickly regained her composure. She glanced at the papers and shrugged. "It's good that you know." "Then you understand why I need money urgently." Patricia shot up, her voice cracking. "You dared to forge my signature? You turned me into a debtor? Emily, do you know you've just ruined my life?" Emily pursed her lips, a stubborn glint in her eyes. "You're exaggerating. It's just a loan. When I'm more successful, I'll pay it all back. For now, I just need you to not stand in my way." Patricia froze. Those cold words seemed to confirm that to Emily, her mother was no longer family, but merely a tool to achieve her goals. Unable to contain herself, Patricia slammed her hand on the table, tears streaming down her face. "A tool? Do you know how many years I've lived just to feed and educate you, to get you where you are today? And now you've taken my name, turned me into a debtor. Emily, what do you even see me as anymore?" Emily turned away, her voice hardening. "I'm just doing what needs to be done. What about you?" "You've spent your whole life clinging to the past, never giving me a chance. If you truly loved me, you'd understand." Patricia let out a dry, broken laugh, a smile tinged with despair. "Love you. If this is how you define love, then I've loved wrongly." The room fell silent, save for the ragged breaths of the two women. Those words were like a knife severing the fragile thread of connection that still remained between them. Finally, Patricia slumped into her chair, covering her face with trembling hands. She cried, not just from betrayal, but because she realized a more painful truth. All her sacrifices hadn't earned Emily's appreciation, but only led her daughter to believe she was someone easily exploited. Emily looked at her mother, a flicker of hesitation crossing her face, but then her eyes hardened again, and her voice dropped to a whisper. "You'll see. Everything I'm doing is for the future. One day you'll understand." Patricia looked up, her eyes brimming with tears, but resolute. "No, Emily. Today I understand. You don't need me. You only need what I have. And that is not love." The words concluded their conversation like a verdict. Emily turned away, her face rigid, saying nothing more. The door slammed shut behind her, leaving Patricia sitting motionless, her heart shattered. In the darkness, she saw clearly. Their mother-daughter relationship was now fractured beyond repair. 2 days after the bitter birthday party, Patricia received a thick envelope from the post office. The corner of the envelope bore the bank's red stamp, along with the chilling words, "Payment Reminder Notice." At that moment, her heart sank, a terrible premonition running down her spine. She tore open the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a stack of printed papers, covered in numbers and stark text. Credit agreement, repayment schedule, interest rate table. Everything appeared as cold and sharp as an indictment. And then, at the bottom of the page, Patricia went numb when she saw it, her own signature under the borrower section. She slumped onto the chair, her hands trembling. It wasn't her signature, but the forgery was terrifyingly accurate. If one weren't familiar, no one could tell the difference. Her breath hitched, her chest tightening as if an invisible hand were squeezing it. For a moment, the room spun before her eyes. The numbers of debt danced as if taunting her. Principal, $120,000. Due date, next month. Penalty interest, 18%. Patricia felt as if all the blood had drained from her body. Her knees buckled, and she only managed to grip the edge of the table to keep from falling. Words echoed in her head. People won't wait. The sentence Emily had uttered 2 days ago now became a dreadful explanation. Her own daughter, her only flesh and blood, had forged her identity to borrow money. In the quiet room, Patricia heard her heart pounding, heavy and piercingly painful. Years of sacrifice, so many tears shed, she thought they would be repaid with gratitude. Now only this harsh debt paper remained. She murmured, her lips trembling, as if confessing to an unseen ghost. "Oh, God, Emily, what have you done?" Outside the window, the wind howled through the trees, rustling the thin curtains. The house, peaceful for so many years, suddenly became a prison, where each bank document tightened its grip on her, making her an unwilling debtor. Patricia sat there, tears welling in her eyes, realizing a cruel truth. The moment her daughter screamed at her, "I wish you were dead," was just the prelude. This was the real dagger thrust into her heart. That afternoon, as weak sunlight slanted through the window frame, Patricia remained motionless at the table, the bank papers neatly stacked before her. She had sat there for hours, waiting for Emily to return. Every passing second felt like a needle prick, both sharp and fueling a fire growing within her chest. The door burst open. Emily's high heels tapped rhythmically on the wooden floor, echoing in the silence. The moment she entered the living room and met her mother's gaze, red-rimmed and tense, she stopped. But immediately after, Emily gave a slight smirk, as if everything had gone according to plan. Patricia pushed the stack of papers forward, her voice hoarse but firm. "Explain yourself. What is this?" Emily glanced over them, her eyes unwavering. She pulled out a chair, sat down opposite, and crossed her arms. "You're quite sharp, Mom. It's good you know. So, you understand why I urgently need the money." Patricia felt as if she had been slapped. For the past 2 days, she had secretly hoped it was a mistake, that someone else had impersonated her. But now, her own daughter admitted it casually, as if it were just a normal procedure. She shot up, her trembling hand slamming down on the table, the rustle of paper like the crack of a whip. "You dared to forge my signature? You turned me into a debtor? Emily, do you realize you've just destroyed my life?" Emily blinked, then sighed, as if speaking to a child. "Don't overreact, Mom. It's just a loan. I'll pay it back. Do you think the bank cares who signed? They just need their money, and I'll find a way to handle it." Patricia choked, her throat dry. She pointed a trembling finger at her daughter. "Your way is to make me a debtor? Do you know, if I collapse tomorrow, this paper will haunt our family forever, and I'll die as a fraud. Do you still see me as anything at all?" Emily bit her lip, a flicker of defiance in her eyes. "I see you as the only support I have. Your friends have families to support them, but you don't. Just be quiet, Mom, and let me handle it." "Why do you always have to make things more difficult?" Those words were like another knife twisting in Patricia's heart. For Emily, support only meant assets, and the name she owned. No motherly love, no gratitude, only cold calculation. Patricia slumped onto the chair, her hands clutching her aged face, tears streaming uncontrollably. She felt as if she had lost her daughter, even though she was still sitting right in front of her. Patricia raised her head, her eyes red-rimmed but blazing with fire. She had been silent for too long, swallowed too many tears. But now, the person before her was no longer the daughter she once knew, but a cold woman who saw her mother as a commodity to be traded. "Emily, I sacrificed my entire life for you. From the moment you were born, I lost everything: my husband, my youth, my health. I worked myself to the bone just so you could have decent meals, so you wouldn't fall behind your friends. And this is how you repay me now. By making me a debtor? By treating me like a label to sign a loan contract with?" Emily clenched her fists, her fingernails digging into her skin. Her voice hissed through gritted teeth. "Don't bring up those sob stories again. I never asked you to sacrifice for me. That was your choice. And now you use it to bind me, to make me indebted to you. I'm tired of it." Patricia felt as if she had been stabbed again. Her heart screamed, but the voice that came out was trembling, mixed with anger. "You call that binding? Do you think I wanted to live this life? Do you think I wanted to work day and night, only to have nothing in old age but this house and these wrinkles? I did it all for you. But you never saw it." Emily stood up abruptly, the chair scraping loudly on the wooden floor. Her face was taut, her eyes sharp as two knives. "Yes, I never saw it, because everything you gave me was tainted with pity. Do you think I didn't know?" People called me the pitiful child, the fatherless girl. Do you know how much I hated hearing that? And every time I heard it, I just wanted to scream at you. Why wasn't it you who disappeared, but Dad? Patricia swayed, her legs trembling. Those words were the final blow, shattering the shell of resilience she had worn for decades. She felt like she was standing in the room, but her soul was falling into an abyss. Tears welled up, and Patricia cried out, choked with sobs. "You're so cruel, Emily. Do you know how hard I struggled just to give you a home? You don't need to be grateful, but how could you curse the very person who gave you life?" The room vibrated with Patricia's heart-wrenching cries. Emily stood there as stiff as a statue, her lips pressed tightly together. A flicker of hesitation crossed her eyes, but it was quickly extinguished by a layer of ice. Patricia sank back into the chair, her thin shoulders shaking with each choked sob. Tears rolled down her cheeks, falling onto the contract on the table, blurring the ink. All her strength seemed to drain from her body, leaving a terrible emptiness. "What did I do wrong to make you this way, Emily?" she whispered, her voice cracking like a shattered mirror. Emily turned away, biting her lip. A fleeting tremor appeared in her eyes, but it vanished quickly. She took a deep breath, trying to keep her voice calm. "You did nothing wrong. You just didn't understand. I'm doing all this for the future. You think I'm heartless, but one day you'll see I was right." Patricia let out a hoarse laugh, her smile swallowed by sobs. She looked up, her bloodshot eyes drilling into her daughter. "No, Emily. I don't need to see if you're right or wrong. I just need to see that you're still my daughter. But today, I've lost you." Emily clutched her bag straps, her face rigid. Her mother's words were a verdict, searing themselves into her heart, yet she turned away, refusing to retreat. The room was terrifyingly silent. The wall clock ticked, each dry sound like a nail driven into her wounded soul. Patricia sat motionless, her gaze vacant, while Emily stood at the threshold, caught between leaving and staying, ultimately choosing to turn her back. Before stepping out, Emily softly spoke, her voice low and cold. "You'll understand. Everything you do is just to survive. I want more than that." The door slammed shut, shaking the entire house. Patricia flinched, but only a heavy silence remained. She buried her head in her hands, weeping silently. The pain was no longer anger, but a deep, hollow crack, stretching from her heart to her very soul. In that moment, Patricia realized, maternal love is not eternal. It can be worn down, eroded, and ultimately torn apart by ambition, selfishness, and unspoken secrets. The house suddenly felt too large, too empty. The silent walls seemed to bear witness, the once happy memories now haunting specters. Patricia sat there, a forsaken shadow, her spirit broken, knowing that from this day on, nothing would ever be whole again. Evening descended like a thick black shroud, pressing down on the old roof. Patricia switched on the small hallway light, its weak yellow glow casting a thin line towards the attic stairs. She stood there for a long time, her hand on the wooden banister, listening to her heartbeat like a knock from the past. Then she ascended. The wooden chest sat in the corner of the attic, covered in a thin layer of dust like frost. Patricia opened the lid. The letter lay at the bottom, where she had hidden it for decades, a cold needle in her heart, never removed. She sat on the floor, her legs numb, her hand trembling slightly as she unfolded the worn envelope. The ink had faded by half, but each word was still sharp enough to reopen the old wound. I knew Emily wasn't my biological daughter. I tried, but I couldn't go on. Patricia closed her eyes. It had been a long time since she had allowed herself to admit. On that day, she had sown the seed of loneliness into her entire life, choosing silence, choosing to bear all the misunderstandings, accepting being labeled a failure. Because the truth was, she didn't take Emily in out of pity. She took her in because the first time she held the tiny, trembling infant, she understood that she was holding an entire life, and she vowed she would never let go. The phone vibrated in her wool sweater pocket. An unfamiliar number. Patricia hesitated, then pressed answer. Mrs. Patricia? This is Lawson, from the bank's risk control department. I need to verify some details regarding a loan application. There are some discrepancies in the timelines and personal documents. Patricia's throat felt parched. Discrepancies? How so? The signature matches, but the old comparison sample is different, and the birth certificate in the file is a copy that doesn't match the county's registry. I apologize. We are investigating potential fraud, so we'll need you to come in. It's also possible a third party interfered. The crackling static on the line startled Patricia. A third party. Those two words were like a spark igniting a long, compressed pile of dry straw in her chest. She thanked the machine, ended the call, and stood up. There was no turning back. Everything was collapsing, and if she remained silent, both mother and daughter would be buried under the rubble. She gathered the letter, Emily's real birth certificate tucked away separately, a flimsy piece of paper as light as a butterfly's wing that she had avoided for 35 years, then went downstairs. It was almost midnight, but Patricia still dialed. After a long ring, Emily picked up. What is it? It's late. Her voice was hoarse and indifferent. Come home right away, Patricia said slowly, each word like a measured breath. Mom has something. She needs to show you. Money again? No, she replied. This time, it's the truth. On the other end, silence. Then a faint click, like an unwilling, reluctant nod, but one that had to come. When the door opened, a cold wind swept into the living room. Emily walked in with the weary face of someone who had just emerged from an unpleasant negotiation. She put down her bag, glanced at the envelope on the table, and frowned. Mom, what are you digging up from the past now? Patricia pulled out a chair, inviting her daughter to sit opposite. She was no longer crying. Her voice, for the first time in years, was as flat as a lake about to churn with waves. Tonight, I'm not asking for another drop of your pity. I'm simply placing the truth on the table. Then, if you want to hate me, to leave, that's up to you. Emily let out a dry laugh. You think a few pieces of paper will save you from that loan? No, Patricia said, pushing the letter and the birth certificate towards her daughter. They won't save me. They'll save you from hating the wrong person. Emily's fingers brushed the edge of the paper, and before she could read, Patricia spoke, slowly, clearly, as if reciting an oath to reverse time. "Emily, your father left, not because of me. He knew you are not his biological daughter." The air shattered into 1,000 pieces like glass. Emily froze. Her fingers halted on the paper. Her eyes blinked rapidly, then solidified in a nameless shock. The wall clock continued its tick-tock, but the room seemed to have fallen out of the flow of time. And for the first time in a long time, Patricia's hands were no longer shaking. "Tonight," she whispered, "we stop lying." Emily sat motionless, the yellow light casting a glow on her face, highlighting her slightly trembling lips. She picked up the birth certificate, her eyes scanning the words quickly, then immediately comparing them to the letter. Her complexion turned pale, as if all the blood had drained from her body. "It's impossible. What is this, Mom?" Emily's voice was hoarse, a mix of indignation and panic. Patricia shook her head, her hands clasped, but her gaze never left her daughter. "I wish it were a joke. But the truth remains, Emily. You are not his biological daughter. The day you came to me, I chose silence, so you could have a family." Emily threw the paper onto the table, the thud echoing coldly. She stood up, approaching her mother, her eyes blazing. "A family? A family built on lies? You let me live 35 years as a deceived person. I hated you, I cursed you, thinking you were the one who made Dad leave. Yet in reality, it was because you hid everything?" Patricia clenched her fists, tears welling up. "I didn't want you to carry that wound. You deserved a complete childhood. You deserved to believe you were born from love, not from a mistake." Emily let out a bitter laugh, but it shattered like cracked glass. "A mistake? So for all these years I've lived in the shadow of a man who doesn't share a drop of my blood. Do you know how I clung to his image? I hated you, missed him, and wished to be like him. But it turns out it was all an illusion." She stepped back, clutching her head, her breath ragged. The image of her strong, confident self had crumbled, replaced by a lost child. Patricia wanted to step forward, to pull her daughter into an embrace, but her feet felt rooted to the ground. "I'm sorry, Emily," she whispered, her voice choked. "I chose silence, and it was the biggest mistake of my life. But you are still my child. Blood doesn't define that." "Love does." Emily's head snapped up, her eyes red-rimmed, brimming with anger. "Love? Don't talk to me about love. My whole life you never gave me the truth. So what meaning does your love hold?" In that moment, the room seemed to hold its breath. Patricia stood still, her heart cracking once more. But this time, not just from betrayal, but because she saw clearly. Her own decisions, thought to be sacrifices, had contributed to the chasm between them. Emily stumbled to a chair, her hand pressed to her temple. All the pieces of her life suddenly felt disarrayed. The image of the father she had once revered, with whom she had compared her mother, now vanished into an illusion. The mocking laughter of many from years ago echoed in her head. The fatherless girl. Emily had gritted her teeth, telling herself she still had half of that man's blood, and now the harsh truth swept away her last anchor. So who am I? Where do I belong? Emily's voice broke, like a child lost in a crowded market. Patricia trembled as she approached, placing a hand on her daughter's shoulder, but Emily recoiled sharply, her eyes filled with despair. You stole my roots. I lived my whole life in a lie. I turned myself into a cruel person, just to fight against a mother I thought was the destroyer. Turns out, it was all because of a secret you kept. Patricia knelt down, tears streaming onto her trembling hands. I was wrong, Emily. I was wrong to think silence was the way to protect you. I thought if you didn't know, you would hurt less. But that very silence has destroyed us both. Emily hugged her head, laughing hoarsely, her laughter mixed with tears. I hated you for making me fatherless. I hated you for thinking you made him leave. And I said such cruel things, wishing you were dead. Do you know, if I had known the truth earlier, perhaps I wouldn't have hated the wrong person. But now it's too late. Too late. Patricia looked up, her eyes red-rimmed, pleading, "No, Emily, it's never too late. You are still my daughter. I have nothing but my love for you. Even if you reject me, I will love you, until my last breath." Emily looked at her mother, her eyes glistening, but her lips remained tightly shut and trembling. A fleeting tenderness flickered, but immediately after, a layer of angry ice covered it again. She turned away, her voice choked. "Love? It's just another chain. You call it love, but I only see shackles." The words fell like a final knife thrust. Patricia slumped down, her heart shattering, but still whispered, "I'd rather you hate me than not know who you are. But remember, my dear, this truth is a beginning, not an end." In the silent room, the ticking of the clock echoed steadily, as if reminding them that mother and daughter were stepping towards a threshold, either reconciliation or permanent rupture. Emily braced her hands on the table, her eyes burning, her breath ragged as if to tear the room apart. She leaned towards Patricia, her voice choked but suppressed with years of hatred and longing. "Tell me everything, Mother. No more secrets. How was I born? Who are my real parents? And why did you choose to make me live a lie for 35 years? Patricia looked up, her eyes misty with tears. Before her, she saw not just a grown woman, but the little child she once was, trembling and demanding the truth. She swallowed hard, trying to regain her breath, then whispered, "That day, you weren't my child. You were left at the hospital doorstep on a rainy night. When the nurse brought you in, you were just a bundle of wet blankets, blue with cold. They said you were barely a week old. No one knew who your biological parents were. They were going to send you to an orphanage." Emily's eyes widened, as if the whole world was shaking. "And you adopted me?" Patricia nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Yes. I couldn't take my eyes off you. So small, so fragile. But in those closed eyes, I found a reason to keep living. I had just lost hope. My marriage was falling apart, and you saved me from the abyss. From the moment I held you, I vowed I would never let go, even though you carried no drop of my blood." Emily stood frozen, her lips trembling. She let out a hollow laugh, but it was choked with bitterness. "So it was all out of pity? You took me to fill a void? To have something to hold on to in my despair?" Patricia shook her head fiercely, her voice trembling but firm. "No, not pity. It was love, Emily. Love from the very first moment. I chose you, not because you were a replacement, but because you were the only gift fate sent me. But I was wrong, to think that hiding the truth would protect you. I let you live in darkness, allowing hatred to grow instead of love within you." Emily stumbled back, clutching her chest, tears pouring down her face. For the first time in years, her strong eyes shattered like crystal. She whispered, her voice trembling, "Then I truly belong nowhere. No father, no mother. I'm just an abandoned child, and now even my mother is just a liar." Patricia collapsed, her hand reaching for her daughter, but falling short. Her voice choked with despair. "My child, don't say that. You belong to me. From that very first moment, you were my daughter. Nothing can change that, not even blood." But Emily turned away, tears streaming down her face, the pain of her lost roots erupting into an unstoppable flood. Emily staggered to her feet, taking a few steps back as if to escape the stifling atmosphere in the room. Her trembling hand clutched the armrest of a chair, her face pale, her eyes dazed as if she had lost her way. I am no one. I don't belong anywhere. Patricia rushed forward, intending to grasp her daughter's arm, but Emily pushed her away with such force that Patricia herself stumbled to the floor. Patricia looked at her daughter, her eyes blurred with tears, but she still pleaded, "No, Emily, don't say that. You are my child. From the first day I held you, you belonged to me. Blood doesn't define love. This heart does." Emily clutched her head, sobs racking her body. For years, she had never cried like this. Those tears were not just for the truth of her lost roots, but also for her self-hatred, having spent her life hating the wrong person. "Why didn't you tell me sooner? Why did you let me go astray, let me hate you, let me become so cruel?" Emily shrieked, her voice breaking. Patricia slumped down, her aged hands clasped together, as if begging before the sternest judge of her life. "Because I was afraid of losing you. I thought if you knew you would leave. I thought silence would keep you with me, but I was wrong. It was the silence that stole you away." Emily swayed and sank onto the floor, her trembling hands covering her face. Her choked sobs echoed throughout the room, mingling with the howling wind outside the window. She no longer had her cold demeanor, no longer her proud gaze. She was just a child who had lost her anchor, shattered by the truth of herself. Patricia moved closer, this time without asking permission, without hesitation. She embraced her daughter tightly from behind. Emily struggled for a moment, but then her strength gave out, and she could only slump in her mother's arms, tears flowing like a broken dam. In the darkness, two trembling figures held each other. On one side was a mother, both pained and regretful. On the other, a lost daughter, filled with both anger and despair. No words were enough to erase 35 years of deception, but in that moment, both understood. At least the truth had been laid bare. Patricia whispered, her voice hoarse but resolute. "You can hate me for the rest of your life, but please, don't let hatred define you. You were not abandoned. You were chosen. By me." Emily tightened her trembling hand on her mother's. Her tears were salty, but deep down, a tiny spark flickered, not forgiveness, nor reconciliation, but the fragile hope that from these ashes something else might grow. After the night the truth was revealed, the house was enveloped in a heavy silence. Emily did not stay the night. She left before dawn, leaving behind the door slamming shut, like a final crack in the wall of their mother-daughter bond. Patricia watched her daughter's figure disappear down the street, her hands hanging limply, her heart so heavy it felt as though it might stop beating. All day long, she wandered through the house, from the living room to the kitchen, finally stopping before Emily's old room. The small room still had a few old posters on the walls, and a thin layer of dust covered the desk. Patricia gently ran her hand over each item, as if touching memories. Every small detail, a teddy bear missing an ear, a crayon box with a broken lid, made her choke up. This was once a place filled with the giggles of a little girl running into her mother's arms. Now, it was just a cold room, filled with silence. Patricia sat on the edge of the bed, her eyes blurring. Emily's screams echoed in her mind. "I don't belong anywhere. I'm just an abandoned child." She clutched the old blanket tighter, feeling as if every thread was tightening around her heart. Her entire life, she had lived only to keep one promise to herself. I will never let her feel lonely. But in the end, she was the very reason Emily fell into the abyss of solitude. As the afternoon shadows lengthened, Patricia sat alone in the living room, the light filtering through the window, illuminating her wrinkled face, etched with weariness. She wondered, if she had told the truth that day, would Emily have harbored less hatred? Or perhaps her daughter would have left much sooner, leaving her with an empty house and the pain of losing a child. Either way, the outcome today was no different. Patricia still sat here, alone, in a brutally desolate emptiness. Her gaze drifted to the wooden chest in the attic, the place that had harbored a secret for 35 years. It had been opened, the truth had escaped, and now there was nothing left in the house to shield her. All that remained was the nakedness of her loneliness, the torment of incomplete love, and the agonizing question, was there any path left for mother and daughter to find each other again? In the days that followed, the house sank into a terrifying silence. There were no footsteps on the wooden floors, no arguments, not even the sight of Emily moving about as before. Only Patricia, who would wake up in silence, make a pot of tea, and sit by the window, watching the bustling crowd outside. She called Emily, but the phone rang endlessly with no one answering. The text message sent simply displayed the cold words, "Delivered." Patricia began to count the days, then the nights, receiving no reply. Each morning, she awoke with the hope of seeing her daughter's silhouette enter, even if it was just to scold or utter cruel words. But all that greeted her was a profound, silent emptiness. At night, the house transformed into a labyrinth of memories. Patricia walked past Emily's room, her hand instinctively reaching for the doorknob, only to pull it back. She feared opening it and finding the room unchanged, like a tomb holding her daughter's childhood. She feared she herself would crumble before the vast emptiness. At times, Patricia wondered if Emily was safe out there. The debts, the threats, the ominous signs, all of it rushed back, making her heart clench. If she's trapped, will anyone be by her side, or will she struggle alone, like her mother once did? The question gnawed at her, stealing her sleep night after night. Emily's silence gradually became an obsession. It was no longer an explosive anger, but a silent distance, more brutal than any curse. Because at least, when her daughter screamed, "I wish you were dead," Patricia knew she still existed in her child's mind. But now, the absolute silence made her feel like a ghost, with no place in Emily's world anymore. Patricia began to lose hope. Each morning, looking in the mirror, she saw a different woman, eyes shadowed with dark circles, disheveled silver hair, dry lips. Gone was the image of the mother who had told herself she would be strong enough to carry the world for her child. Only a frail old woman remained, waiting in despair. One evening, while clearing the dinner table, Patricia paused by the empty chair where Emily used to sit. She placed a set of dishes down, poured a glass of water, and then sat staring at the vacant chair. Her eyes welled up, and her heart whispered, "My daughter, where are you? Do you still remember your mother?" In the stillness, the question vanished into nothingness, receiving no reply. The house, once accustomed to laughter, arguments, or at least the sound of Emily opening and closing doors, was now filled only with heavy silences. Even the wall clock ticked loudly and uncomfortably, as if emphasizing each lonely second. Patricia began to feel like a phantom wandering through her own home. During the day, she sat by the window, watching mothers walk by with their children, her heart aching. One mother held her small child, kissed its forehead, and Patricia's tears fell silently. She had once had such moments with Emily, moments she thought would be eternal. Now they were like a torn dream. At night, Patricia couldn't sleep. She often sat at her vanity, gazing at her aged face, the deep wrinkles, the white hair, the tired eyes. She asked herself, "Am I still a mother? Or was it all a failed role? I raised my child with my entire life, but in return, I received only hatred. So does motherhood truly exist, or is it just an illusion I created to live?" The question gnawed at her, making Patricia feel like she was losing herself. She had lived her whole life for Emily, to the point that when Emily disappeared, she no longer knew what to live for. The entire house seemed to remind her of her helplessness. The empty chair at the dining table, the framed photo of Emily as a child, the old doll lying discarded under the cabinet. All of it served as evidence of her failure, a failure to hold on to her daughter's love, a failure to protect their maternal bond. At times, Patricia almost wanted to call Emily just to hear her daughter utter another cruel remark, because at least those venomous words reminded her that she still existed in her daughter's mind. But then, she would put the phone down, afraid that the cold voice on the other end would extinguish the last flicker of hope. One evening, Patricia sat on the porch, watching the pale moonlight cast a pall over the wilting flower garden. She whispered to the darkness, "If you hate me that much, I'm willing to accept it. But please, don't let this silence be the end. Let me know you're still out there, still breathing, still alive." Her voice cracked, blending into the night wind. In that moment, Patricia felt she was no longer a mother, but just a lost traveler, clinging to something that had slipped from her grasp forever. On a drizzly morning, Patricia sat by the window, her vacant eyes following the raindrops streaking down the glass. She no longer counted the days since Emily left, the number having become unbearable. Each morning she woke, she found only an empty, suffocatingly quiet house. Sometimes, Patricia thought, perhaps if one day she disappeared, no one would even notice. That thought crept in, dangerously like a poisonous smoke, making her feel that life was gradually becoming meaningless. For her midday meal, she only cooked a bowl of thin congee for herself. She looked at the empty chair across the table, tears falling into the bowl, making the flavor even more bitter. Perhaps Emily will never return, she told herself. The words were like a knife tearing through the fragile hope that remained. Just then, a knock echoed at the door. Patricia flinched. She wasn't expecting anyone, much less a visitor. Her steps were shaky, her heart pounding. She opened the door, but it wasn't Emily. It was the mailman. He handed her a crumpled envelope with no return address. Patricia took it, her heart pounding. As she gently opened it, inside was only a small piece of paper, the writing hurried and shaky. "Mom, I'm still alive." Just 6 words, short, but enough to make Patricia collapse on the steps, clutching the paper tightly. Tears streamed down like a fountain, but for the first time in days, they were not just tears of despair, but of a tiny light kindled in the darkness. Emily was alive. Her daughter was still out there somewhere. Patricia pressed the paper to her chest, whispering tremulously, "Thank God. Thank you for letting her still be breathing." In that moment, though the distance between mother and daughter remained vast, Patricia knew she hadn't lost Emily completely. A fragile thread still connected them, though it was frayed and stained with tears, and as long as that thread hadn't snapped, she wouldn't give up. Outside, the rain still fell, but within Patricia's heart, for the first time in many long nights, a flame flickered, weak, wavering, but enough to warm a heart that had seemed extinguished. The next day, Patricia sat for hours at the kitchen table, the note from Emily placed neatly before her. The 6 hurried words were still etched in her heart. She turned the paper over and over, as if each stroke of the pen were the last lifeline keeping her from the abyss of despair. "Mom, I'm still alive." It wasn't over yet. Being alive meant there was still hope. Patricia knew that. Wherever Emily was, whether lost in debt or darkness, her daughter still existed in this world, and that was enough for her to hold on to. As evening fell, Patricia went into the garden, pulling out clumps of weeds around the wilting flower beds. She wanted to do something meaningful, for herself, for this house, and for the day Emily would return, if that day ever came. Her mind was no longer filled with screams or curses, but with the image of a child from long ago, running barefoot in the flower garden, laughing when her mother called her name. Patricia looked up at the sky. She knew it wouldn't be easy. Emily might never forgive her. But at least the truth was out, and all that remained was the enduring love, though wounded, that still burned in a mother's heart. That night, Patricia sat by the window again, like many nights before. But this time, instead of emptiness, she had something to wait for. She imagined the knock on the door, Emily's familiar footsteps. She didn't know when that day would come, a week, a month, or years later. But she believed, somehow, the bond of motherhood would lead her daughter back. She whispered softly, her voice trembling but full of determination. "Emily, I will be here until you are ready to come home. I won't hide you anymore. I won't hold you back. Just know, I am always waiting." Outside, the night wind blew through the garden, carrying the scent of damp earth and the rustling of leaves. The sky was dark, but a single star twinkled, faint yet persistent, like a small light clinging to the darkness. Patricia looked at it, her heart aching but also warming. Her story with Emily had no clear ending yet. There were still debts to settle, wounds to heal, and a distance to bridge. But deep down, one thing was certain. A mother's love, even when trampled, had never truly disappeared. And it would be the fragile thread that kept them both from falling into the abyss of despair. Deep into the night, the house was enveloped in silence. Patricia sat at the wooden table, the warm lamplight casting her long shadow on the wall. Before her, Emily's short note lay undisturbed, 6 words like a flickering flame in a storm. "Mom, I'm still alive." She gently placed her hand on the paper, closed her eyes, and whispered as if speaking to her own heart. "If I'm still alive, there's still hope. If there's hope, I will never stop waiting." Outside, the wind howled through the leaves, the moon hidden behind thick clouds. But in Patricia's eyes, a small star still shone, enough to remind her that any night must eventually give way to dawn. No matter how long she had to wait, Patricia would remain in this house, keeping the ember of hope alive in her heart and whispering her daughter's name each night. Because at the very bottom of her pain, there was only one truth she believed. A mother's love, though betrayed, though tested, had never truly died.